Good afternoon and welcome to Norwegian-American Genealogical Center in Naiseth Library. Today's topic is going to be Norwegian and Norwegian-American Lutheran Church records both yesterday and today. This will help you with your process of learning more information about your ancestors, particularly on the U.S. side, because the church records very often predate the formation of the counties and the units of government that we're familiar with in today's world. A little humor this morning today to get us started. Now into the serious matters. A little bit of review again of the history of religion in Norway. First of all, Christianity was introduced by Olaf in 1030, and the Catholic Church was established with monasteries and convents along with bishops, nuns, and priests. After Norway was taken over by the Danish government, the Danish king converted Norway to Lutheranism in 1537 after the Reformation, and the priests either had to convert or leave the country. Norway had no theological colleges at the time, so the potential candidates for ministry had to go to Denmark to be trained. And this presents a problem because the language that was used in the church books can vary. Because the pastors were trained in Denmark, you will find in the records sometimes combinations of Church Latin, Danish, and Norwegian over different time periods. The early records use a church calendar, thus the first Sunday of Advent was the beginning of the new year. And then the later records use the Gregorian calendar. And in a future webinar, I'm going to give you a presentation on the ecclesiastical or the church calendar so that you have a better understanding of how the whole thing worked. Now, one other aside about the Norwegian-American Lutheran Church records is that the original churches that were formed here in the U.S. Were tied still to the church back in Norway. The government was concerned about the immigrants, I shouldn't say the government, but the church more so, was concerned about the immigrants coming to America and not having a church available to them. So they sent ministers over as missionaries to serve in this country. Now, as time went on, there was an increased need, and there were not many pastors that were willing to come to America. So they began to form their own synods and created their own schools for pastorship. And over the years, there was a very number of different synods, the Norwegian Synod, the United Synod, the Anti-Missouri Synod, and eventually the Hauge Synod. Now, about between 1900 and 1920, there began to be mergers of some of those synods in with other synods, and eventually we ended up being under the umbrella of the American Lutheran Church. And at that time period, the church officers felt that it was a good idea to microfilm all of the early church records for preservation purposes. The ALC at that time was headquartered in Dubuque, Iowa, and this was a volunteer program for the local congregations. They had the right to either participate or to refuse, and they also had the right to decide what records they wanted to have microfilmed for preservation. So the materials were sent to the ALC, they were microfilmed, and then they were returned back to the congregations. One of the major problems here is that most generally they included the information from the ministerial records, which is really what we are interested in knowing about. But some of the congregations, especially in large cities, chose to only have their congregational minutes microfilmed and not the ministerial records. And this presents a problem for us because we really don't care when they put a new roof on the building. What we would like to know is what happened underneath the roof. So it became a little bit of an issue. for us today, because we have purchased all of the old ALC films. It's now part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church Synod, which is headquartered in Chicago, and we have them available for people to use here. And it appears from the internet that they are gradually being being digitized and are available through Ancestry.com. So that's a little bit of background on the American Lutheran side. Now, looking at a early set of records in Norway, you can see here that we are dealing with Church Latin as well as some Danish. And essentially this is saying that in the name of Jesus, in the year of Christ of 1769, and then below it, these records were kept in a chronological order based upon the church calendar. The pastors made up their own books, and they all did it in a variety of different fashions. Some of them just did a chronological, where the first event on the first Sunday of the new church year, you had a baptism, you might have a marriage, you may have a death. All of those are recorded in a chronological fashion, and so you have to read through them very carefully to know the events that your person is dealing with. You'll notice here that they do make mention and do use the calendar of the 1st of January. Then it follows with the 2nd of January and then continues on down in that fashion. So you will see sometimes Roman numerals being used. You will sometimes again see the Church Latin being used. And here is a little better example of, again, the variations. Here we have a baptism, and this is the word that you have to be looking for to know. Now, very frequently, the pastors would underline the name of the child. This is also giving you the information on the parents, the father and the mother, and then these people are the people that served as witness to the baptism. But immediately following that, you have the pastor apparently had not visited the church for a little bit of time, and so he had many burials to take care of. When the pastor wasn't available for the service, they would go ahead and bury the body, and then when the pastor did come, he would then consecrate the grave and do a little service. And so that's why you'll see that there's people from January and March and June, all of the same year of 1768. Now here's a more standardized classical way of doing these records, and again, it behooves you to very carefully read through to see what events are occurring. So there's a marriage record in here, there's baptismal records, the whole 9 yards. Now some of the pastors would make, they would take the page and divide it up into separate columns. And one would be for baptisms, one would be for marriages, one would be for confirmation, and another for burials. So each pastor did his own thing, and you just have to kind of go with the flow and figure out what's going on. Now in this particular one, what I did was I enlarged to show you that here, for example, is a baptism, and the child's name is Abigail, and then following that are the names of the parents, and then lastly the witnesses to them. So you have to read through very carefully. Now you'll notice on this particular record there is no birth date, and that's also true with the earlier records. Very often they only give the date of the baptism, and until you can find another record that gives a more concrete date of birth, the baptism has to serve as your proof of the birth of the individual. Also, as you go back into the earlier part of the 1700s, you will find that at some point in time, the pastors sometimes did not record the complete information on the family. They will only identify the name of the father. They do not give the mother's name. And if you're dealing with a common name, that becomes more of an issue, trying to figure out who the individuals were in this particular situation. Another twist to this is that sometimes they will only give the father's first name followed by the name of the farm that he lived on at the time of the birth, and again, no wife's name. So it becomes much more difficult trying to figure out exactly who we're dealing with in these records. So if you have an Ole Olson living on the Vik farm and all you have is Ole Vik, there could be potentially more than one Ole Olson living on the farm. And also because you don't have a patronym to work with, you really aren't 100% sure. Now, starting in 1912, the Norwegian church records became standardized, and they have changed a number of times over the years, and we're going to go through each of the categories. So we're starting out with the baptismal records, and usually the church records are kept in sort of a chronological order of life. So baptism is usually listed first, followed by confirmation, followed by marriage, followed by burials, and then in addition to it, we have a couple of other records that we will be talking about. One is vaccination, and the other one is the people moving in and out of the parish. So one of the problems is that this was started in 1812, but that doesn't mean that the pastor stopped using the old format in 1812. He continued to use the old books until they had been used up, and then started using the new version. So here we see this particular baptism doesn't occur until 1819. And going across the columns, this is the year and the date of the birth of the individual, followed by the name of the child being baptized, followed by the date of the baptism. Next we have the names of the parents of the child, and then in this column we have the witnesses to this particular baptism. Now, historically, they did not choose their witnesses as we have the custom of doing in today's world. Very often these were people that were just present in church that Sunday that saw the pastor do the baptism. Now, in this situation, there are, for baptisms, there's two pages, one for the male baptisms and the other is for the female baptisms. Apparently we didn't mix at that particular time period in time. So the left-hand page would be for the males, the right-hand page would be for the females. This is something that they did at time periods where they would create indexes at the back of the book. And this is saying that on page number 659 of this particular church book, you will find that person in the index. And if you go to that page, you will get reference to maybe other events in that person's life. And then the last column here is a column dealing with the notes of any sort that the pastor wished to record at the time of the baptism. Now, the first ones didn't last very long. In 1820, there was another change made, and they started expanding the information on the records a little bit. And at this point in time, I believe we go to 2 complete pages of information. We'll have to wait and see here. But number one thing is that they now have broken the segregation. Males and females are all recorded on the same page. So while this one was started in 1820, this book is from 1844. And in the first column, we have the date of the baptism, the date of the birth of the individual. And in the next column, we have the date of the baptism. The records are filed chronologically by the date of the baptism. So when you're looking down the list, if you have an idea that the person was born in a particular month, you can go down the list looking at the date of baptism. If you know that, for example, that the person maybe was born in June, obviously you're not going to find a record of the child until after the time period in June. So that helps you to know whether you need to go far into the book or if you just need to go a short distance into the book. The next column indicates the status of the child at the time of birth. Was the child legitimate or illegitimate? Um, this particular one is listed as a legitimate birth. If it's an illegitimate birth, there's a U in front of the word agata, A-G-E-T-A, and very often the pastor would underline that word to have it stand out. Then over here you have, again, the name of the parents of the child, and this usually includes the name of the farm that they are living on at the time of this event. The other thing about the legitimacy is that if it's an illegitimate birth, they reverse. They put the mother's name first, followed by the father's name, whereas the normal pattern is to list the father first, followed by the mother's name. Now, this is the right-hand page, and here we have the witnesses to the baptism, and then this is indicating whether the child was baptized in the church or if it was a home baptism. If the child was baptized at home, they would usually confirm the baptism in the church at a later time period. And when we get into some of the the newer records, you will see that being shown. This again is dealing with an index that was used at that particular time period. Now, the next major change was in 1877. And here you'll see that there's quite a bit of difference in the records. Almost everyone starts out, all the records start out with a numbering of the numbers of baptism in that particular calendar year. This is the date of the birth again, and this is the date of the baptism. And you'll notice that the child was born the 25th of December of 1899, and so the child was baptized on the 21st of January of 1900. Name of the child, and here again we have the names of the parents. One thing that some of the pastors will do in these later baptisms is that they will sometimes give either the year that the couple married or the numbers of years that they have been married. And so again, that can help you with now to search for a marriage record if you don't already know that information. Looking at the next side, the right-hand side, this is identifying where the people were living at the time. So this particular baptism was, the family was living at the Fallness farm. This family was living at Surholand. Another piece of good information is that here it shows the birth year of the father and the birth year of the mother. And then here it shows the names of the witnesses. And then in the last column, again, it gives you whether the child is legitimate or illegitimate. And then in the last column on this particular page, it's primarily geared for remarks. Now, moving on to confirmation, we start out again with 1812, and at that time period, confirmation sometimes was once, twice a year. It just depended upon the number of young people at the time. But confirmation records can really be of value because it gives information about where the person was baptized if they were not baptized in this particular locality. So we start out, first of all, with a numeric order. There usually is, on the first page, they will identify the date of the confirmation. This is the name of the parents of the person being baptized, and then this is the date of baptism for the confirmant. And in the next column, we have the information on, and this includes that includes the age of the individual. And then here it deals with his or her religious knowledge. They were graded based upon their ability to know how to write and church history and Bible and history and what have you, and so that was all recorded along with that. This column deals with the vaccination. Now, Norway was a forerunner of vaccination for cowpox or for smallpox, and you were given a certificate when a child was inoculated, stating the results of it and what have you, and you had to prove at confirmation and marriage that you had been vaccinated for smallpox, and so that was very important to the people. The last column deals with, again, the number in the index. Okay, moving up to 1820, we now have the year, and on the top of the page it gives the date of the confirmation, and then everything down the page is dittoed. This is the name of the person being confirmed, their age at that time period, where they were born, and then here again the names of the parents. Continuing here, this is their score for their examination for the confirmation, and then again in this column is dealing with the vaccination, and here they give the exact date of the vaccination as a reference. Moving up to 1877, once again you still have the here you have the confirmation date on the top of the page, then here you have the names of the confirmants. Here we have both the date of birth and the baptism, and this is where the person was born, the farm that they were born on, and if they were born in another clerical district, they would indicate that clerical district as well. And then this is where the family is living at the time of the confirmation. So again, this gives you now in this case, most of these people are living on the same farm that they lived on when they were born, but that's not always the case. Next we have the names of the parents, and here we have again the information on the vaccination, and then lastly over here, again, the grade that they received for their confirmation conflict. Now I'm going to move forward to the Norwegian-American records here for just a minute. The Norwegian-American records were pretty much taken as the records were done in Norway, and so the layout of the books is very, very similar. But one of the things that can be really very helpful on the Norwegian-American records, depending upon how much information the pastor collected, is to show, for example, where the confirmant was born. And if we click on this and enlarge it, you can see that he's very specific in this case with saying Winneshiek County, Iowa, Cass County, North Dakota, coming down to Norway, Stord, Norway. So this is telling you, if I want more information on this family, this is where I have to go to be able to get it. And that can be a tremendous help in doing your research. So we very often use confirmation records as one of our starting points when we're trying to figure out where a family came from in Norway. This doesn't always work, but if it works very well. Now, going to marriages. Excuse me for just a second because I have to turn the page. By the way, I should mention that the information on these headings, again, I've mentioned in the past our Norwegian research guide, which is available for sale. This shows both the headings in Norwegian and in English, and that's a wonderful thing to have sitting by next to your computer when you're doing research to be able to quickly figure out what's in the particular columns. So going back to 1812, we start out with a numbering again, and then next to that is the information on the groom, his name, the farm name that he was using at that particular time period, and the same thing for the bride. Now here we have ages, and we have age for her. The other thing that will pop up in all of the church records, particularly dealing with the the fathers, is it will identify maybe occupation. So it will say farm operator, or that he's a carpenter or a sailor, whatever. The other thing that comes up is that they will indicate the social status of the individual. So right here, it says that this gentleman is 58 years of age and that he was an Enkaman. Enkaman means that he was widowed, and this is a second marriage for him. With his wife, who's 48 years of age, she is listed as being a piga. A piga is an unmarried woman. And so this is information that helps you, again, because now if you're dealing with any children that Anders has, you know that they were from a previous marriage. These are the witnesses to the marriage, and this is, this is the date of the marriage. And then this is again dealing with the index page. Moving up to the 1920, we again have the numeric order, and here again is the date of the marriage, this time in the first column. And now we have the bride and the groom both listed in the same column. But here it's shown that he's the unkarl, meaning that he is a bachelor. He's not been married previously. And she's listed as being the piga. This is the name of the farm that they were born on. And here again is ages. And here we have something new. We have in this column the name of the father of the groom, and here we have the name of the father of the bride. And this is very good information, because it tells you that we're looking for, she's listed as Elizabeth Anders' daughter, but now we know that, to subtract the age from 1838, take the 29 off of that, and you now know that you have to be looking for a child with the name of father being Anders Paulson. Now, at this point in time, the records again go over 2 pages, and in the first column here, you have the names of the witnesses of the marriage. In this column, this is the person who presented the information to the pastor about the couple that wished to marry. The banns of matrimony were supposed to be announced 3 times in the church before the couple could be married. And then in this column, it's again information about the smallpox vaccination. If there's information in here, this is dealing with the bridegroom, if he was an official, or if he was living on a pension, or something of that sort. And then in the last column, you have a section dealing with if this had, either one of these people had been married previously, there would be information about the settlement of their estate. If you were widowed and you wanted to marry again, you had to have settled the estate for the rights of the children, so that there was no question as far as inheritance. And so they would usually record a date in there of when the probate was finished. That again can help you to move back to figuring out a potential death date for the other spouse. Okay, now moving up to the 1977 records. Here you have the year on the top, and then you have the calendar date of the wedding. And in this column, it tells you whether the groom has been married previously or if it's the first marriage, and the same thing for the bride. So in this case, this is his second marriage, her first marriage. In this column, you have the names of the bride and groom that are being married, and in this column, it indicates again the name of the farm that they are living on at the time of the marriage. In this column, you have the birthplace of the groom and the year of birth, and directly below that is the information for the bride and her year of birth. This is telling you that that he may have been from another parish. No, she was from another parish because it says in Rindal is the name of the clerical district. In this column, they're asking for information such as where was he or she confirmed, and the year that they were confirmed. So again, that's information that can help you with your continued research. On this page, we have, again, the names of the parents, the fathers, and in this column, we have the names of the witnesses, and here it gives the information on the 3 Sundays that the banns were announced prior to the marriage. In the next column, there is a question about legitimacy as far as permission to marry, and again, that's where you would have information if there had been a previous marriage. And in this column, again, talks about the previous marriage, and you'll see here that there is a date on the 15th of April of '84 that the probate was finished, and so that then gave the gentleman the right to be able to, or the gentleman to be married again. Now, the Norwegian-American records vary dramatically in the amount of information that's in them. We've come across church books where all they do is give the name of the couple marrying, no ages, no birth information, and the name of the witnesses, and that's all. But in this particular collection, and these were early, and the earlier records are the better records for the most part, it's giving the name here, and you'll have to excuse, you'll see there's brackets here, and each one of these brackets indicates a marriage. But here, this one's got some stuff over it, so I'm not sure. I think there was a change in the name, and the pastor tried making a correction here. But anyway, here is the name of the groom and the name of the bride, and then the information going across here is dealing with the groom. So this is the name of the parents of the groom and the name of the parents of the bride. And you'll notice here in this case, they're using both the patronymics for the father and the mother, which again helps dramatically with moving forward with your research. On the other half of the page, this is indicating where the individual was born. So all of these people at this time period were all born in Norway. And then this deals with where they are living at the time period of the marriage. Next column indicates where the marriage took place, and then in the last column it deals with the, there is a little column squeezed in between here, I forgot about that. This is the date of the wedding, so this one was on the 19th of March, this was on the 20th of March, and the year again is usually identified on the, at the beginning of the new year. Then these people are the witnesses to the marriage in this last column. Now, going to burials. Burials is kind of an interesting situation in Norway because it appears that if you died and there was, if you say you've gone out fishing and you drowned and the body was never recovered, there may not be an entry in the church book because they were not really necessarily recording the deaths as much as they were recording the burials. So again, in 1812 you've got the chronological, and you'll notice again here too that we have segregation. The male deaths are on the left-hand page, the females are on the right-hand page. But this is supposed to be the date of the death of the individual, and this is the date of the burial of the individual. And sometimes there can be a big gap because what they would end up doing is the person died, they usually get buried in a reasonable fashion unless it's in the middle of winter and they can't dig the grave. The burial is actually recorded when the pastor comes to the church and does the blessing over the grave. And so don't be a bit surprised sometimes if you see a major gap between dates. Now, you're coming down to this one, the gentleman died on the 31st of July and was officially buried on the 2nd of August, so the pastor obviously was close by for that particular one. Here is the name of the individual, and this is dealing with his place of residence. And then here you have the age of the individual, and in the next column you have that index page as was mentioned earlier. And then lastly, they're talking about the common register again. And again, this is notes that there must have been something about that particular burial that the pastor felt worth writing something in the book. Moving up to 1820, there's a little bit of a change. We have now the same information from the standpoint of the date of the death of the individual, the date of the burial, and then in this column you have the information about the individual, the full name of the individual, and also where he was living. And then over again here, age, and then this is again the place of, I believe the place of birth. Let me just double check that. Yeah, the place of residence at the time. Then on the left-hand page, you have information on the far right-hand side that can be of help to you. These are children that were born that died before they were baptized. So there's no baptismal record entered in for these, but you'll see that the name of the parents are listed here, and then information about the length of time and what have you. Now sometimes the midwives would baptize babies, and then again that baptism had to be confirmed later on in the church records, and so you may find an entry in the church record where the child lived, and there would be 3 dates in the records in that case: the date of the birth, the date of the home baptism, followed by the date of the confirmation of the record in the church. So if you know that there was a child that was born and died, in particularly in the case of the same year, and you don't find anything in the baptismal records, then come and look here for information about the possibility of another death. Now, beginning with the here, this is a good example of what I was talking about earlier. Here is the date of the death, here is the date of the burial, and then here is the date of the actual service. And in this situation, they were both on the same, so it wasn't a problem. But here you have the name of the individual. This is his occupation. He's a timmerman, he's a woodcutter, something of that sort. He's unmarried. These two are both married, so it says gift in front of their name. This column deals with again, marriage information. So it may, if this person had been married, they would sometimes write in the name of the spouse in this column, and also sometimes with children they would write in the name of the parent in that particular column. Then here we have the year of birth, and they sometimes only give the year, they don't give the complete date of the birth of the individual. And then this is indicating where the person was residing at the time. The one is indicating the birthplace, and this one is indicating the place of death. Sorry, this keeps popping back and forth here. They did start also doing cause of death, but bear in mind that there was not a physician involved in these, so many times it's just it could be speculation as to what caused the death. And then the next two columns over deal with the death information has been reported to the probate court, and then in the other column was the doctor called. And most generally, what in the world? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, whether the doctor was called, and then also was the death reported. And then this is notes again, and this is kind of interesting because it says that that he died in New York. And apparently was brought back to be buried in Norway. So that's a very interesting twist to stories. Okay, now the next set of records that we have to deal with are the people that are moving into and out of the parish. It was the custom in the old days, when you moved from parish to parish in Norway, that you went to the pastor and reported that you were wanting to leave. And he would then fill out write out a handwritten certificate showing that your date of baptism, your date of birth, if you were confirmed, that information, if you were married, that information, and also the last time you had taken communion in the church. And this was all geared, you had to pay for this certificate, and that became a rub with some of our Norwegian ancestors. You then took that certificate, and when you moved to the new parish, you presented it to the pastor, and he would record in the inflita records, or the moving in records, the information about your joining this particular locality. And so here in this case, we have the records of, in 1912, they were referred to as tilgang, meaning moving into the parish. At that time period, they didn't keep a record of the people moving out, but that began a little bit later. And so here you have the name of the individual, his age, where he had been living, and where he will be living in the new locality. So it helps sometimes when you're trying to figure out families and their connections and what have you, to be able to know this information when they move from one place to another. In this column, you have information referring to the register again, but in this particular case, it doesn't appear that the pastor is keeping any records. And then lastly, in this column is a record dealing with comments. Okay, moving up to the 1920 versions, we start getting a little more information. First of all, we have the date of the person in the inflita records registering with the pastor. Again, the name of the individual, their age, and sometimes they will not only give the age, but they will give the complete date of birth, as in this particular case. This was a child born in 1865, and so for some reason the pastor decided to record that information. Here again, this is information on where the person had come from, and this is information on where they're going to be living in this new locality. Then it continues on. This is the name of the church where it's the person is registered, and in the next column is the person able to support himself. And so generally they were able to support themselves, but they maybe give a little information about the entire family. Now, this is all dealing with the inflita, and then in this little tiny column on the right-hand side, you have the people that are leaving to go elsewhere, whether it's to America or to another clerical district in Norway. So this information really gets crammed into a very minimal amount of space. Here we have the date. In this case, all he's reporting is just the year. Then we have the names of the individual. This gentleman is a sailor. He's living on the Vieg farm, and he's married, and the wife's name is here, and then the children are all squeezed into this one little column. We have years of birth, ages for these two people, and in this case, the child is shown with the complete date of birth. And they are leaving from this parish, which is Godneshaven, and they're going to Haugesund, which is just at the top end of the island across the bridge, and you're in Haugesund. Now, when we get up to 1877, we now have a page dedicated for the people moving into the parish, as well as a page for the people leaving, so it becomes easier to read these records. Again, this is the year of their transfer. The next column is dealing with the where they have come from. This particular person, this person and this family have been living in England. Then the names of the individual, including everybody in the family. Then next we have where they are going to be living, the birth year, and in some cases with children, they will give the complete date of birth of the individual. And then in this column, information dealing with their birth year and whether they've been confirmed. If they were married, there may be marriage information. It's all included in this particular column. On the Utflyttar records, again, we have the year. And these records are sometimes very specific about, the date of the person registering with the pastor. This is where they're going to. So we have America, and very often you will find ditto marks or lines like this being used, meaning that it's the same for everybody showing. The names of the individuals, the year of birth, and then again the same information dealing with confirmation and marriage and vaccination and what have you. So the Utflyttar records are the ones that we are most interested in, because this tells us when this family decided to leave Norway to come to America. And that helps, especially after about 1867, with being able to look in port records, which we'll be talking about when we deal with immigration, to help you know the time period that your family left to come to America. Now, when they left to come to America, they again were supposed to register with the pastor, but again, you had to pay for that certificate, and so many of the people would bypass this part of the system. They felt that, and they knew from others that had gone to America that nobody in America really wanted those certificates. If you came from Norway to here in Wisconsin and you joined the church, they would ask where you were from, and they would take you at face value for who you were and what you were doing. So it's a little bit different when you're leaving for America. Now, there is a congregation called Spring Prairie, which is just north of us here in Madison in Columbia County, where the people did come with certificates, and the pastor collected them, but then ended up, they were microfilmed, and we now have copies of those records, but it wasn't necessarily the common thing to come with those records. Now, on the Norwegian-American side, we had, especially in the earlier churches, we had records of people arriving, and again, they would kind of like what they were doing back in Norway, but this again can be very helpful information because it sometimes tells specifically where these people came from. So in this top line here, you have Jens Hermansson and his wife Anna Johnsdottir. He's 40, she's 35. They have a child, Johanna, who was born and baptized in 1839. And these are records that are taken from the Spring Prairie Lutheran Church. On this side of the page, it tells you where they left from and the time period that they left, and then identifies that they were born in Norway. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is the church that they're going to go to. Now, at this time period, Spring Prairie also was the pastor served Norway Grove, Spring Prairie, Bonnet Prairie, several churches in that area, and so that's why he specified in the book as to which congregation these people were joining. And then this deals with the date that they registered with the pastor to be a member of this particular congregation. In this column, there would be notations, again, if there was anything that was of value. In this column, but not very often used, it's identifying if they left this parish to go to another locality. These records were kept, and you'll find in some congregations that over time they kept these records, but then they went to recording information to help people. Occasionally they would do a census record and identifying the sizes of the family and the people and what have you. And that can help you, again, with tracking your family, because you sometimes end up with not being able to find a record. If you go back to this page again, you'll see here that you have lists of children with complete birth dates and confirmation dates and what have you. So again, this may be totally new information to you about family members that were living at that particular time period that either may have died or married and were lost track of. So these records can be quite valuable if you can find them in the church books. The one thing that I didn't show you is vaccinations. Usually the vaccination was done within the first couple of years of birth of the child, but that varied from place to place and people and what have you. It sometimes can help to look for those records because it gives you the age that the child was at the time of the confirmation. I'm sorry, at the time of the vaccination. And so it helps you to get a closer handle on was the child vaccinated in this parish or was the child vaccinated in another parish and what have you. Now, did the pastors always follow the rules? Well, here's a book from Norway in 1862, and it appears that the pastor decided that he wasn't going to spend the money to get an official book, and so he made up his own. The only good thing about this is that he's following the headings that were used in the official records, so that all of the questions that you would normally have are being answered in this particular case. Even going over to this side, and again, this is home baptisms, and then whether the child is legitimate or illegitimate. So you will run across this in the records in Norway at various time periods. It just depends upon the pastor as to what he wants to do. And here's a situation that also occurs very often in both Norway and in America. They'll get to the end of the book and they still have blank pages in the book, but for example, in this situation where I believe we're talking about a marriage record, and this is a particular year, you come to the end of the year and you can click on the next page and it's blank. Well, my suggestion is you back up a page and you go down to the right-hand bottom of the right-hand page, and here you'll see a note that's telling you you need to go to page 210. So if we go to 210, you'll see that this is marriages in 1882, and we had been in marriages in 1882, but it ended at the bottom of that page. And here he is using space that was originally designated for confirmations, and in order to keep using the same book because there's other pages that could still be used, he's crossed off and created his version of the marriage records. So you have the standard information that's asked on a marriage record at that particular time period, but it's a little bit confusing because it's in with the confirmations. So then when you click on this side here, you'll see that this was in fact page 2, this was 210, and here we have 211, and here it continues. So that's a valuable piece of information, is that when you come and it comes to an end, go back to the last page that you had information for marriages or baptisms and look to see if there's a little note down here at the bottom, and if so, then you have to go to that particular page to be able to continue the story. The records in Norway, they use the books stay in the local parish until 80 years after the last entry in the book, and then they're transferred to the National Archives. And at the National Archives, they were microfilmed and by the LDS folks, and eventually these were digitized, and the digitized records are really great. Part of the advantage to the digitized records over the original records is that the noise that was static and what have you that was on the microfilm records has all been cleared up. They can electronically erase that, and so sometimes on the bottoms of the pages it's kind of hard to read some of the records because the paper had faded and what have you. Excuse me. And so it makes it more difficult to read. These, the digitized records are much clearer and easier to read. The other thing is that, for example, if sometimes the pastor is not dipping the pen in the ink enough, you end up with a section of the book that is more difficult to read because it's the ink wasn't dark enough. And then on another part of the page, it's the reverse. He's now dipping the pen, and so it's a clearer record. Well, when they digitized these, they did it with different settings. So if they ended up with a page that was light, they would go back and rescan that page and then change the settings so that the darker areas are now pretty dark, but the area that was underexposed is now pretty close to being readable. So that again is a big advantage of using the digital archiving. And we will be having at some point in time a webinar dealing with actually reading the church records to show you and how to use the digital archiving to be able to get to the records that are available there. So taking into account, I put together a couple of case studies to show you how the church records can be of value to you. So we have a Peter Anderson who was born in Lund in 1847. It's known that he came to America at age 10 and was married in the Coon Prairie church here in Wisconsin in 1877. Following that, he went to North Dakota. The problem with the marriage is that it was by a justice of the peace, and so there was no church record for it. He was just married in Coon Prairie area of Vernon County. But on the marriage record, the parents were listed as Andreas and Gudba Peterson. Well, Gudba doesn't really appear to be a good Norwegian name. In addition, no patronymic is listed for her. She's just listed as being the spouse of Andreas Peterson. So one of the things that we did was we went forward and looked at the confirmation record for Peter, and here we found out that the parents are listed as Andreas Pedersen and Gudbuer, Christopher's daughter. So this helped dramatically with being able to figure out the actual names, know that we had the right person back in Norway. So we went back to the Norwegian records and found his baptism, and discovered in the Utflytja records that the child had left Norway with his grandparents in 1857, and that the father had died in 1848, and the mother remarried in 1855 and stayed in Norway. She is still shown in Norway in 1865 in the census. So this helped to clarify the whole situation, because they knew that Peter was in America, but they really had no understanding of how he ended up in America and who he came with and what have you. So again, it was using the church records both here in America and in Norway that we were able to track the information to be able to figure out who he was, where he came from, and what have you. So here is the page of the burials in Norway to verify this, and sure enough, here is the date of the death, the date of the burial, and Andreas Pedersen, the name of the farm, and his age and what have you, and that all matched up perfectly to what we were looking for. Now this was another sticky one. It was Ole Olsen Roe, and Dina, Christopher's daughter, had come to America with children. They had more children in the U.S., including a son, Charles, who was born in 1873. We know that from the census, but we do not know where he was born. There appeared to be confusion. Was he born in Norway or was he born in America? And there was also a question about who the father was. It appeared that there may have been a death and a second marriage involved here. We found the family in the whole church records for Goodhue County, Minnesota, and Charles was listed as the father, and Charles was listed in his confirmation record as being the son of Dina, and she was listed as being widowed. I need to backtrack. I'm sorry. Now I'm getting off kilter here a little bit. In the church records for Goodhue County, in the registration of the families, we found Charles and Dina, but she was listed as a widow. So we now know that he died, but he wasn't. It wasn't known he wasn't registered in the church book that he had died there. But the other thing that we found is that Charles was confirmed in Holt, and there was a note on the confirmation record saying that he had been baptized by Pastor Green. So this indicated to us that he was probably baptized in here in America. But who's Pastor Green? So the next question is, who and where do we continue the story? And we have two sets of books that I will show you in just a second that can help with this kind of search also. One is a list of the pastors that served the Norwegian-American congregations, and in that particular book, Lars Ingebretsen Green is shown living 1873 to 1909. I'm sorry, not living, but serving congregations in Medalia, Watonwan County, Minnesota. But there were three churches that were connected to this pastor, and we unfortunately did not have a film to cover Medalia and those churches. So it meant that the family needed to go back to that part of Minnesota and do some further research, possibly visit the church and look at the records to see if there's a record of the death of the father. This is the book that the first book is dealing with the pastors that served from 1843 to about 1927. There's two versions of this book. One is in Norwegian, one's in English. The Norwegian book only goes to 1917, the English goes to 1927. But it gives information about the pastor, what synods he was involved in, when he was ordained, background information on him, and where he served time over the years. I realize this isn't Pastor Green, but it's the same information that you would find. The other book is a book dealing with the churches in the Norwegian American Lutheran churches here in America, dealing with from 1843 to 1917 again. This book is written in Norwegian, but it's broken down by states and then by counties, and then the churches that were organized in those localities. And it gives information about the name of the church, its organizational date, its mailing address, and then it gives you a list of the pastors, again, that serve that particular congregation, and some of the officers involved. Sometimes there's pictures, sometimes there's not pictures. And this, again, shows how the church is split off over time. All information that can help you, again, with continuing to do your research. So, now one other thing I should mention about the church records in Norway is that they vary over time periods. Norway was a state church. Lutheranism was a state church, so this meant that supposedly everybody belonged to the Lutheran Church. But we had groups of people that were known as dissenters. These are people that left the state church and essentially had no organized religion. You will find in some of the books, in some localities, they will have a listing of baptisms and marriages and burials for the dissenters. They are not complete by any means. They may only be for certain time periods. Pastors handled the dissenters in different ways. You will find in those baptismal records, if your family were dissenters, you may find the birth of a child. There is no baptismal date, obviously, so they're in a separate section of the church books. Later in time, especially in the cities, Norway began to loosen up its hold on other religions. Methodists became quite popular in Norway as well as they did here in America. And you will find, particularly in Oslo and in Bergen, you will find church books that have been microfilmed of the early records of the Methodists in America. I'm sorry, in Norway. And again, they follow pretty much the same pattern as far as baptisms and confirmation and marriage as the Norwegian Lutheran Church. So that's my overview of, excuse me, I just have to pause here for a second. Sorry for that cough. Take a look at the cartoon. Probably a lot of us have the same problem. Once again, I want to give credit to the Bryan Foundation of Stoughton, Wisconsin for their support in putting together these webinars and also allowing them to be put onto our website at no charge to you. Future webinars that are coming up, the next one is going to deal with the church calendar, as I mentioned. And then I think the next topic that we will be getting into is the immigration process. So continue to keep an eye on the website. We do send out constant contact messages to people to make them aware of the new message, but the best thing to do is just to keep coming back to the website and look to see if there's anything new. So thank you very much and have a good day.